right, so I'm getting the message that this is recording. Well, welcome everybody. I am Danae Wolf with the Learning and Org Development Unit, and this kicks off our Digital Engagement and Design Bootcamp series that we're doing all week. Every day at 1 p.m. we'll have a different session for you. The session that we are doing today focuses on sort of a high-level aerial view of strategic engagement, sort of focused on things like social media and digital engagement specifically, but we will sort of be housing this conversation in a broader conversation just about engagement in general. So a lot of what you'll learn today are things that you can take back to your county offices once we're back doing traditional face-to-face events, and think about how you can strategize to not just do digital engagement, not just do face-to-face engagement, but how you can create sort of a hybrid engagement strategy that covers a little bit of everything and that offers our clientele really high quality ways to get in touch with us and to engage with us both digitally and face-to-face. So before we kick it off, before I get into the slide deck here, I would like to know how each of you is using digital engagement specifically, what social media platforms you're using, or whether you are facilitating maybe online courses or an email listserv. What are you all doing in terms of digital or virtual programming right now? And it might not be like super formal programming, like teaching an actual event. It could just be, hey, we're doing a social media campaign, or hey, I've been communicating via like informal Zoom office hours or things like that. So Facebook, Camp Counselor meetings, Zoom meetings, Facebook, Twitter, email, lots of Zoom, social media. I'm assuming Facebook is probably going to come up as a pretty high one here. Beth said creating Canvas courses, that's excellent. Facebook and emails. So you'll notice we have some formal stuff going on with some of those Canvas courses, a little bit more formal types of engagement, and then social media, a little bit less formal. County websites would be less formal. So let's go ahead here. I'm going to jump into our slide deck. You should all be seeing the strategic engagement slide deck. I thought we'd jump off into this session today talking a little bit about social media platforms and who is spending time on what platform. There's a lot of other things that we could talk about right now, like formal online courses or like Zoom meetings or email listservs. We can touch on some of those things as we go through the discussion here today. I'm hoping the formal part of this will take like 30 to 40 minutes and then we can open it up for conversation. I wanted to focus a lot on social media because that's a lot of the questions that we're getting right now is about like social media engagement and, you know, what platform should I be using? I will kick us off by saying we are in a situation right now where we are being asked to not create any new social media accounts that represent extension. So if you maybe are in a county that doesn't have a Facebook page, or maybe you want to start an Instagram but you don't have one, or a Twitter but you don't have one, we're kind of being asked to not create those. If you're in a situation where you don't have like any social media accounts representing your county in any capacity, then I would recommend you touch base with Cheryl Buck or Mitch Mosier, and they might have some recommendations for how you can apply for a social media account. So basically, moving forward based on our university policy that came out last year, any new social media account has to go through an application process, which is kind of a little bit lengthy. You do have to submit like an example content calendar. You have to submit like how you intend to manage that account. They have certain specifications for like how much time should be spent, you know, thinking about content and designing and disseminating content. So it's kind of a lot to work through. The last thing I'll mention before we really jump in here is that our Wednesday session at 1 p.m. we'll be doing a Facebook 101 course. So for those of you who are actively managing Facebook accounts, or maybe you have one but you're not actively managing it, we'll help you kind of jumpstart those accounts too and talk a little bit about how to get the most engagement out of those platforms. And as always, I'm going to open up my chat box here. If you have questions, go ahead and just keep sending those in. My LOD team will kind of be observing the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat too as we go through. So feel free to send your questions as we go today. So I'm going to jump in by starting with who is spending time on which platform by certain like demographics. All of this information comes from Pew Research, and you can access all of this information for free directly through Pew Research Center. I think it's pewresearch.org maybe. There are tons of like social media fact sheets and information about digital engagement, and you can look at how many people by age and by different like socioeconomic demographic are spending time on social media platforms, how many people use those platforms to get their news, how frequently they use those platforms. There is a plethora of information here. But I thought we would start by kind of breaking this down by age, because that's one of the easiest demographics to look at. So if we look at this is primarily a millennial group, sort of, we might get some Gen Zers here as we look at like aged 18. We get into like younger and mid millennials. This doesn't cover some of our, what I like to call our elder millennials, which is the category that I would fall into. 91% of this age group uses YouTube. It's huge. You might be surprised to learn though that 79% use Facebook. So we hear a lot that Gen Z and millennials do not use Facebook. That is statistically not an accurate statement. Almost 80% of us use Facebook. And it shouldn't say us because I don't fall in this category, but a lot of the next age group uses Facebook as well. You'll notice Facebook has a stronghold over every single age demographic compared to other social media platforms except YouTube. Now, why do you think YouTube is one of the heaviest used? And you'll see this as we go through some of the ages, some of the other ages as well. YouTube is by and large the one of the most used social media platforms. So why do you think that is? Some of you might even not use other platforms like Facebook or Instagram, but you probably have watched a YouTube video or two in your lifetime. So Kay says because it's video-based, videos are content king. So if you're gonna think about the most engaging type of content, videos are it. Sydney says all other social media platforms link back to YouTube. A lot do. Because you can find out how to do most anything. Yeah, the real reason is because you can access YouTube and gain benefit from YouTube without actually being a content creator and without having an account. So even if you don't have a YouTube account, you can search for and view videos on the platform. Whereas on a platform like Facebook, generally speaking, you're probably going to be a content creator. You're probably gonna have a profile, you're probably gonna be submitting content, and some people just don't wanna do that. So that's why YouTube is so heavily used. So among this younger demographic, Instagram is pretty high up there at 67%. Snapchat, of course, is pretty popular with this group and especially younger audiences at 62%. And then only 38% of people use Twitter. So I know a lot of counties are using Twitter right now. Twitter is not one of the most used platforms. In fact, it falls pretty far down there in just about every demographic. So if we look at our 30 to 49-year-olds, YouTube still has the stronghold at 87%. Facebook remains the same at 79, Instagram 47, Snapchat a little bit less at 25, Twitter even less at 26, less than the younger age range. So we're getting into age 50 to 64. YouTube still has the stronghold at 70%. But you might be surprised that Facebook is 68% of this age demographic uses Facebook. So over the years in teaching digital engagement, I've heard a lot of my colleagues in Extension say, well, nobody in my county uses Facebook, so I shouldn't have to either. Statistically, that's probably not an accurate statement. A lot of people use Facebook. This age range, almost a quarter use Instagram. That's pretty high. Notice though Snapchat falls quite a bit in this age category. Only 9% use Snapchat. And a lot of people that I talk to in this age range who do use Snapchat say they do it to stay in touch with either children or grandchildren. 17% use Twitter. And if we look at our 65 plus age group, all of a sudden YouTube is no longer the king. It's Facebook. 46% of this group uses Facebook, only 8% on Instagram. Might be surprising that even more of this age group use Snapchat at 9% than Instagram, and Twitter is still holding kind of strong with this group at 26%. So is there anything surprising about any of these statistics? Who's like by age, who's using which platform?
Hey, as you're asking that, someone did type in, is this just using but not necessarily frequency of use? Do you know?
Correct, Diana. So this is using, you can dig into the Pew research statistics and you can look at how frequently that use is. So they kind of break it down by like daily use and I think weekly use. So yes, it is not like a daily thing. A lot of people do use social media daily. The other thing that I will mention here is with Facebook. Even though Facebook has a stronghold, especially with those younger demographics, if you're using Facebook, you are probably likely using other programs too, like other platforms too. So like, I think most millennials, most Gen Zs, they're not just on Facebook, right? They're on Facebook and on Instagram and on Snapchat, and they might have a Twitter account. So even though they're using Facebook, it might not be their primary platform. So that's another key thing to keep in mind. So Erica says, I'm surprised that the 65 plus is using the Twitter social media. Yeah, I think that's kind of surprising. I was also surprised, I mentioned this before, that if we look at the younger demographics, so many are using Facebook, because I think the media has had us believe that no millennials and no Gen Zs are using Facebook. And again, that's just not true. So I tell people, like, if you have time to spend on one social media platform, Facebook is probably it. So let's go into, if we're looking at all American adults, so this is aged 18 and over, who is using which platform, Facebook is at 69%. So 69% of American adults aged 18 and over use Facebook. The next one is LinkedIn at 25%. I have gotten questions here and there, I think a lot from our community development educators about using LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has changed a lot over the years. I personally don't use LinkedIn. I deleted my account years ago and then I recreated it. I'm sort of far removed from using LinkedIn. But if you are using it to blog or to create high quality content for clientele, it can be a really good resource, particularly for anything business related or entrepreneurship or things like that. That next one, that camera icon, is Instagram, 37%. And then Twitter, only 22% of American adults are using Twitter. Next up here, we have Pinterest, Snapchat, YouTube, and WhatsApp, which is a messaging app. So Pinterest is pretty low at 28%. What is Pinterest great for? And what demographic do you think is using Pinterest the most? It's great for pictures, great for recipes, great for anything like food related, health and wellness, children's activities. Pinterest is probably blowing up right now with like what to do with kids at home. Anything like home projects or gardening. So there could be a lot of really good uses for how we use Pinterest and extension. Christina said, especially moms. Yeah, there's all kinds of projects on there for families with young kids, homeschooling, things like that. It's primarily women. I think it's largely women that use Pinterest, which is probably unsurprising. So Snapchat, 24% of American public age 18 or over uses Snapchat. And who primarily uses Snapchat? It's younger audiences primarily. So if you have like 4-H youth that you're trying to reach, Snapchat could be a good platform. Snapchat got a really bad rap when it first came out because it was known as the disappearing content platform, right? So you would send somebody a snap. A lot of kids were using it very inappropriately to send inappropriate content to their friends because it would disappear. And then people caught on that you could screenshot some of that content and they were posting it on other social media platforms. So content doesn't ever disappear. And that's important to note as well as we think about the professional use of some of these platforms. Next one is YouTube, 73%. And then finally, WhatsApp, which is at 20%. And I think a lot of people around the world use WhatsApp because it's encrypted, I believe. So it's a little bit more secure than using other messaging apps like your native, like iMessage for us iOS, iPhone users. So anything surprising in here? Again, YouTube's huge, and then Facebook would be the next big one. We use WhatsApp to communicate with my son in Scotland. I know a lot of people internationally use WhatsApp as their primary messaging app. I've always heard that. So the next thing that I want to talk a little bit about here is what we call this web of engagement. Early on when we were talking about engagement, we called it the path of engagement, which is sort of a very linear way of thinking about how people engage with us. I sort of reworked this into what I like to call the web of engagement, which basically kind of shows how we create and then map out certain pieces of content to help people move from awareness about an issue to actually a behavioral change around an issue. So I think it's really beneficial for how we think about our work in extension, particularly because we are not just in the business of creating content for entertainment, we are in the business of creating content for real change and impact. And I love looking at this from this web of engagement standpoint. You'll notice there's a lot of different engagements frameworks in the marketing world. So you might have like different consumer engagement models. The marketing funnel, I think, is one of them, which basically dictates how a consumer becomes initially aware of a product to purchasing that product, then advocating for their friends and family to purchase that product. So our extension web of engagement starts with initial awareness. We want to create awareness around a particular issue, and we can do that in a variety of ways. People might accidentally come across a piece of information. They might be scrolling through a social media feed and they happen to come across a piece of content from Extension. They might go into Google and Google search a question and happen to come across a fact sheet that we've written. They might hear it word of mouth through a friend of theirs. There's a lot of different ways that people become aware of issues, but that's sort of the starting point. Next, we want to move people strategically to a trial experience with us. And a trial experience could be a number of things. It could be somebody attending a face-to-face workshop of ours. Of course, that's not happening now in the next couple of weeks anyway. So in the digital world, it could be somebody signing up for an online course or signing up for a Zoom webinar or participating in a Zoom meeting. But it's a little bit of a deeper connection than just like scrolling through your social media feed and coming across a piece of information. It's that next step. Then we have some deep learning that happens. People are interested in the topic, they're now aware of it, they've come to some sort of trial experience, and now we've hooked them somehow, and they want to learn more, so they continue to learn more. And again, we have to move them strategically from one step to the next. And then finally, if we're doing things really well and really right, hopefully these participants, these learners, will become advocates of that type of content. So this is where the real behavioral change starts to happen. It's where people start to advocate for change or impact in their community. This is the level where we start to see things like Master Gardener volunteers and 4-H volunteers or donors, people who have a deeper relationship with Ohio State University Extension. They understand this content area or this issue, and they start to spread the word to their friends and family. And it might not be in a formal relationship, right? It might just be this person consistently shares out information on social media. This person might be advocating for their friends and family to take an online course or to attend different programs. But this is sort of a simple way of thinking about this web of engagement. And we will revisit this web in a few minutes once we kind of start to wrap up and I go through a couple more pieces of information. The thing that I want to stress here is, especially when it relates to social media, a lot of what I've seen happen with Extension people is they focus on only pushing out content that is marketing related. In other words, they're only using social media platforms to market traditional face-to-face events. They're not thinking about social media as a vector or as a platform to actually distribute and educate audiences. And I want us to kind of shift that thinking a little bit. So I like to talk about this other model that I like to think about. It's high touch, high tech hybrid. We tend to be very siloed in that we think about content as being either high tech or high touch, excuse me, which is things that would be largely face-to-face. They're things that can only really happen through connection with an extension educator or a county office, or it might be like connection with a Master Gardener volunteer or 4-H volunteer. So in the chat box, or if you'd like to unmute yourselves, can you tell me some examples of extension programming or events that might be high touch and that need to remain high touch? We couldn't move them into a digital world very easily. 4-H camp is a huge one. Club meetings, nutrition education, particularly if you're doing things like cooking demonstrations, it might be difficult to do that in a high-tech way. Any other ideas that you can think of that have to sort of remain high touch? Ag trainings. I'm thinking about like field visits and stuff. I started my career in extension as an ag educator. So anything that would be like out in a field that might be difficult to do in a high-tech way. State fair. Yeah, you're not going to get the same experience, are you, Elliot, if you like take the state fair in a completely virtual way. You're exactly right. Skillathon. Food tastings. Yeah, you're not going to taste food very well over Zoom. Not likely anyway. So next we have things that can be moved to an entirely virtual platform. In this situation, your audience may never come into contact with you as an extension professional. They might not even know who you are, where you are, the work that you do. They're never going to know your name, but you can still create content and your audience can still engage with that content in a very meaningful way. So what are some examples of high-tech programming or high-tech, could be events? What are some things that you can think of? Email challenges, yes. So chances are you're never really going to know who all those participants are. You might never know their name. They might never know your name, but you can still deliver really impactful programming and educational materials to them. Webinar trainings, horse helmet safety videos. Yeah, so high tech would be things like you might have a YouTube series of videos. This would probably be people who follow you on Facebook but never come to any programs. This could be people who take like an online course, like a self-paced online course where you aren't actually instructing them, but the content's already built, it's made, and they just enter in the program or the online course and take all that content, but they never come into contact with you. Neither one of these methods is right or wrong. Both of these are really great avenues to take, but we want to get to a point where our strategy becomes more of a hybrid strategy, where we have both face-to-face stuff, high touch, where we build deep relationships with people, but then we also offer some stuff in a completely high-tech way, so the people who don't really want a relationship with us can still have that. In a lot of cases, what you'll find is we have people who engage with us in both ways, sometimes simultaneously, right? So they might be at a program and they like it so much that they're tweeting it out to their followers. And that's a pretty high-tech thing, right? So then their followers are getting the very high-tech piece of it, but they're not at that program face-to-face. We want to get to a point where people come to a face-to-face program, and when they walk away, they can still engage with us in a meaningful way. They don't have to be in front of you as an instructor to be getting high-quality content. So we want to try to move our content into that hybrid strategy. So does anybody have ideas for how you're already doing this? Strategically, not just like accidentally, like, oh, it accidentally happened, but do you have examples of how, and I'll just spit out a couple theoretical examples here. You're at a face-to-face program, and before you get started, you tell everybody, hey, we're on Facebook. Go ahead and take your mobile devices out and follow us on Facebook so that you can stay up to date with the great content that we are distributing. Or it might be, hey, sign up for this email challenge from this face-to-face program so that when your participants walk away from that programming, they're still engaging with you. They're still engaging with your content. So does anybody have examples of how they've done that strategically in the past? And again, feel free to unmute yourselves here. Create a WhatsApp group, Nora said, so you can continue the conversation. Any other ideas or any other examples of how you've created this hybrid strategy?
This is Patrice. One thing that it's very in early stages, but working with OFA and the new home buyers, they do an online test through OFA, and then the educators talk with them, and it's on a phone conversation, so we never see them, but it's about their personal details and information. And then my hope is that our next step, but this is kind of down the road, maybe it's quarterly updates by email, or maybe it's a website or something like that, that we have some ongoing contact with them as new homeowners in the future.
Yeah. So Patrice, that's such a great example, right? So you're giving them different opportunities to still engage with you, even when they're not like in front of you face to face. And that's what this hybrid strategy is all about. So some other ideas that we're getting, try to get everyone an email newsletter. That's great. Collecting email addresses. I cannot overstate the importance of getting people's email addresses. Email addresses sometimes change, but not very often, right? Sometimes we get bounce backs, but getting people's contact information is huge because email newsletters are one of the greatest ways that we can reach people. Social media is great too, but as you might know, and we'll talk about on our Wednesday session, Facebook doesn't always feed our content to our followers, right? So statistically, what they say is only 2 to 5% of your Facebook followers will ever even see your content unless they make a point to actually go to your Facebook page, which is probably unlikely. That's not how many of us use Facebook. A couple other ideas here. Instagram, Facebook scavenger hunt at the county fair. That's a great example of sort of a hybrid strategy. They're in person, but they're also engaging in an online world. Training in person, then office hours, yes. Remind group chats to share content with each other after virtual meetings, Clover Clips, video information for 4-H clients via social media. These are all great examples. So some of you are already engaging in this hybrid strategy. And I'm going to give you guys sort of a framework that you can use to think about actually how you can blueprint this out, like kind of map out the different pieces of content. to strategically move people inward on that web of engagement. And that'll make more sense as we get to that piece of the session. So my biggest piece of guidance here is to don't silo your content out. Don't think about what happens on Facebook as existing in this silo, completely aside from what happens during your face-to-face program. Think about, like, if you have a certain educational topic, think about that as like a campaign, right? And under that campaign, you will have a portfolio of content. Some of it will be high touch, some of it will be high tech. Think of it like that portfolio as being your program, right? Your big P program. So avoid sort of siloing things out and thinking about it very individually. The biggest thing here is we want to avoid dead-end engagements. We don't want people to walk out of a face-to-face event and have no idea how to continue engaging with us. We want them to follow us on Facebook. We want them to come to our webinar. We want them to sign up for our email listserv so that we can continue to hang on to them and continue to move them inward on that web of engagement. So avoid those dead ends. Always give people that stepping stone forward so they know exactly how to continue engaging. And in order to do this, you really have to strategize. I think as an educator, I can admit that I was all over the place, right? I never just sat down and mapped out programs. I was doing an ad hoc program here and some ad hoc social media work over here and my email list over here. I wasn't really strategizing. I didn't have this like blueprint that I developed for myself. And I think that blueprint is really key to being impactful. When it comes to social media in particular, I mentioned earlier that a lot of what I have seen on social media is people just using it as a platform to market face-to-face programs. And I think we have to move away from that and into the idea that Facebook is a really powerful program, as are other social media platforms, for actually teaching and educating and creating impact on a platform that is never really face-to-face. You don't have to be face-to-face to have a really strong impact with your clientele. Those of you who have attended digital engagement sessions with me in the past have probably heard me say this before. When it comes to social media, I've often heard people say things like, well, it's really difficult to measure impact on Facebook. It's really difficult to measure impact on Twitter. So why should I bother investing time in it when I can't get those measurables? And what I always come back with is, when is the last time we have measured the impact of a fact sheet? When is the last time we've measured the impact of a peer-reviewed journal article? We don't. We can measure reach and we can measure engagement, but it's very difficult to measure the impact of a fact sheet that's just living out there on the web. With social media, I don't want to say that it's impossible to measure impact, because there are some ways that we can think about. And a lot of that is just, again, being strategic. And if you have a social media campaign all around a particular issue, and this is where the outcomes come into place, it's really, what do you want to accomplish here? Identifying those metrics of success up front, and then finding ways to collect that information. Oftentimes with social media, though, I like to think about it as a vector to get people to move inward on the path of engagement. So you start with social media to create awareness, but then from social media, you start to really develop relationships with people, and then they start to attend face-to-face programs, or then they sign up for your email listserv, or then they attend that webinar, and you're moving them inward. So some of the outcomes that you might develop for yourself, I like to think about this as the DIME method, D-I-M-E, which stands for diversify, inform, market, or engage and educate. So diversify is, I think, one of the best ways that we can use social media is by just thinking about diversifying the audiences that we reach. There might be some audiences who, due to some sort of constraints in their life, they may never come to one of your face-to-face programs, and that's okay. We can still reach those audiences through platforms like social media. And the great thing is, social media is free. And even though you might not reach all of your followers, if you are creating high quality, consistent content, you can reach a lot of people and have a lot of impact there. You can also use Facebook or other social platforms as a means to inform people. So this might be just like you could be informing your 4-H advisors of certain deadlines, or your 4-H families of certain deadlines. Same with like master gardeners. I see a lot of people using Facebook groups for dedicated audience segments. So you might have like a Facebook group that's private just for your 4-H families in your county. Same with a master gardener group. We'd had that in Summit County, which was really effective. We're stuck in this market bubble though, for the most part. Again, most of us are only using Facebook as a means to market programs that are traditional face-to-face programs. We want to move to that engage and educate. We want to move to a platform where we can actually engage our audiences meaningfully and then educate them on important topics. And again, move them inward on that path of engagement or that web of engagement. Any questions about anything I've said so far before we head into this quick framework that I'll show you? And then I'm going to drop a link eventually when I can find it into the chat box, which is a fillable PDF of this framework, this life framework. And you can actually work through that either individually or with any teams that you're working on. It's just sort of like it kind of helps you map out different types of content, your audiences, what they care about. But before we head into this, any questions or comments from anyone? I get really excited when I talk about digital engagement, so I tend to talk really quickly, which I think like some people feel like it's just a whirlwind. So if I'm going too fast, please just stop me. And don't hesitate to continue typing questions into that chat box.
Hi, this is Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
From Medina County. I just had a really quick question. First of all, great information. It's all very, very interesting, but I wondered what your thoughts were about engaging across like multiple platforms versus like focusing really hard on one platform.
Mm-hmm. My best advice for that is it depends on who you're trying to reach. And I will give you an anecdote, and some of you have heard me say this or tell this story before as well. Years ago, I was in a program, we were teaching a digital engagement session, and somebody asked the question, I'm on Twitter because my supervisor told me to create a Twitter account. And it was a two-part question. How do I teach my county folks how to use Twitter? Because most of them don't use it and they don't know how to use it. And then how do I get them to follow my county on Twitter so that we can use this as a delivery platform for them? What's wrong with this question? If your audience isn't on Twitter, why are you? Right? We need to go where our audiences are. So Rachel, my advice for you, and this kind of helps you work the life framework that I'm going to teach, helps work you through this. You start with identifying who is your audience. Who is your audience? What do they care about? How do we frame our content to really hook them based on what they care about, not what we care about? And then what platforms are you going to use to engage those audiences? Depending on who your audiences are, you might be engaging different audiences on different platforms. And this is another, I think, default that I tend to find in extension professionals is we just tend to regurgitate a bunch of stuff on social media. We just tend to like use it as a sort of a dumping grounds for content without any real strategy behind who am I trying to reach here really, and with what message. So you might have a better idea of kind of how to work through this after I get through this model. And I think it looks like Amy put the link to that fillable PDF in the chat box. So thank you so much, Amy, for that. And you can open up this link and kind of follow along with me if you're interested. I'm going to do like a super high level of this framework. Starting first with, so the LIFE framework, LIFE, stands for Learn, Interpret, Frame, and Engage. And in that first portion, what we want to do is learn about our audiences. So we identify who is our audience and what do they care about? What challenges are they facing? What needs do they have? What opportunities do they have in their community? And then we start to kind of develop out in the marketing world what we would call character profiles. So in the marketing world, they go as in-depth as creating a name for this character and going and finding a stock image that represents this character. And basically you're developing a profile of a person that represents a broader audience group. And for any given educational topic, you might have 5 or 10 different audience segments that are interested in that group. But instead of just saying like, we're gonna give out a bunch of information that we hope is relevant to everyone, which probably isn't the case, we're actually going to separate out these audience segments. Each one is like cares about something different, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper, figure out what they care about, and then create content and use delivery platforms that are specific to those audiences. One of the examples that I tend to like to use, because I've used it so much now, is if you wanted to teach like a pesticide safety course for backyard like home gardeners or just homeowners in your community. Maybe you're driving down the road just like I always do, and you see a lot of people out like spraying pesticides in their yard without wearing like proper protective gear, right? They're out in like sandals and their kids are playing in the yard and they're out just spraying pesticides like to kill the weeds in their driveway. How are you going to teach this, right? So you could start by identifying who are the various like audience segments that would care about this. Well, we might have just the regular like homeowner that uses pesticides on a regular basis. You might have master gardener volunteers would be another audience segment. You may even include skeptics, people who hate any and all chemicals and think that they should be banned across the entire world. That might be another audience segment who you might be able to pull into the conversation with the right content framing. So once you have those character profiles sort of built out, now we start to interpret the needs of these audiences. So my background, I used to work for the National Park Service as an interpretive park ranger, and my job was to basically translate the park resources, whether they were cultural, historical, or natural resources, translate those resources into things that people care about. And we call those interpretive themes. So if we were talking about the bald eagles that nest in the national park, for some people, bald eagles represent freedom. It represents America. For other people, bald eagles represent a comeback story. It represents conservation. And as a park ranger, I would have to, on the spot, identify what does this person care about? How do I engage them in this beautiful story of bald eagles nesting in the park where there was once no eagles in the park left? So you sort of have to get into the heads of people here. So if you were talking about, let's say, those skeptics who hate any and all chemicals, well, why do they not like chemicals? For some people, that emotional connection or intellectual connection might be the health of the earth. It might be the health of like natural resources. Other people might care about human health or health of animals. Each of those are entirely separate emotional connections. So if you frame the issue as an environmental health issue, but your person couldn't care less about environmental health, let's hope that's not true. But if your person doesn't care about the health of the natural world, you're not going to be able to hook them by having this wrong interpretive theme. So it's important to like interpret the needs of your audience. And once you've done that, you can start to frame your messaging. So you start to think about what is the actual message that we want to send to these people. And I like to divvy this out into both positive framing and negative framing. So positive framing would be something like, if you use pesticides responsibly in your yard, and if we're thinking about this from the environmental perspective, if you're using pesticides responsibly in your yard, you will maybe have a yard filled with insects. And I realize that might not be great for a lot of people because typically pesticides, like you don't want insects. But for me as a bug lover, I want to see beneficial bugs in my yard. So you frame it as you'll have a lot of beneficial bugs in your yard and they'll take care of the pests. That's a positive framing. Negative framing of that exact same thing would be if you're not using pesticides responsibly, if you're not using IPM practices, you're going to be maybe overloaded with pest insects and you won't have any beneficial insects. And maybe you won't have any birds because you don't have any bugs for the birds to eat. So positive and negative framing. Another topic that we could address with this would be healthy eating. If you eat healthy, if you eat a lot of healthy fruits and vegetables and whole grains, you're at a less risk of getting cardiovascular diseases. If you don't eat healthy, this is the negative framing, you will be at increased risk for cardiovascular disease. You're sending the same exact message, but some people will respond to the negative framing and other people will respond to the positive framing. You can do both. You can do both in different pieces of content. Again, that comes back to sort of the strategy and the blueprint. Finally, it's time to start engaging your audiences. So now that you've thought through who your audiences are, what do they care about, how are you going to frame the message, now you get to decide what delivery platforms are we going to use. So Rachel, this kind of goes back to your question is, do we use multiple platforms to engage the same people? It really depends on what your objectives are. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish here. We do know that in terms of content types, video is king of content, especially on social media platforms. Infographics tend to do really well. We know that posts with images do better than text-based posts alone. But this is where you really start to identify, my master gardeners aren't probably using Snapchat, so I'm not going to use Snapchat to reach them. I'm probably going to use Facebook to reach them. I might have a group of farmers who aren't using Facebook. So in that case, I might have to think about a face-to-face event. or maybe a Zoom webinar, something maybe more formal. So it really just depends on who your audiences are. So I told you we'd come back to this web of engagement here. So if we think about the web of engagement, each rung of that web represents a different sort of stepping stone in that pathward to becoming an advocate of this topic, to creating real impactful change. So we start first with awareness. Those outer rungs sort of become awareness. And I like thinking about this as a web as opposed to just like a linear path, because people might become aware of this issue in a variety of ways. It might be social media. It might be a flyer that they see hanging at their local library. It might be word of mouth from a friend. So there's all these different points that people can enter into this broad educational topic. Next is the trial experience, then the deep learning, and then finally in the middle, we have advocacy. So this is kind of what this looks like. We want to think strategically about each of these rungs of the web. And then as you start to map out different content, again, what content are you going to create to help people become aware of this issue that you're trying to make them aware of? So in this case, we might start with a social media campaign. In order to do a trial experience, we might invite people to a face-to-face workshop. For that more deeper learning to happen, we might invite them to take an online course and earn certification in this topic. And then finally, for advocacy, we might say, hey, we'd love for you to join our volunteer program so that you can help us send this message to a broader audience. This is what we mean when we talk about building out a blueprint. So now the question becomes, are you going to do this for every single thing that you ever teach as an extension educator or program support staff? And the answer is no. When you think about this level of sort of mapping your content out on delivery platforms and content types, you're really going to do this with some of that higher level, like big impactful stuff, right? So this would be, if you're thinking about how to address high level stuff like the opioid epidemic or healthy eating or water quality issues across the state. This would be probably a lot of county level or even state level programming, as opposed to like you as an individual educator doing this. That said, you as an individual educator may find a lot of benefit into sort of thinking about this strategy, especially if you have like a campaign that you're trying to do in your county around a particular area. So sort of some final words here is we tend to have a very technology-driven conversation when we talk about innovation and we talk about things like social media. I hear a lot of people like that Twitter anecdote that I mentioned, like somebody saying, well, my supervisor told me that I should be on Twitter because other people are on Twitter too. It's never about the technology. It's about what the technology can do for us. And if you don't think that that technology is going to be beneficial, if you know that your clientele are not going to be using that technology, then don't use it, right? We use technology as a means to enhance our programming. So I'll leave you with these final words. Technology should always enhance, it should engage, and it should educate. It should never, next slide here. It should never confuse people. It should never clutter what you're trying to accomplish, and it should never complicate your programming. Technology is there to really help us. And if you get to a point where like this just doesn't make sense for what I'm doing, then don't use it. It's as simple as that. Don't try to force it just because it seems like the right thing to do. So that was a lot of information in sort of a very short amount of time. I do have some resources here. This is basically my favorite stock image and stock video resources. Some of you have heard me say some of these before. My favorite one is Raw Pixel, which has, it's my favorite because it represents a huge diversity of people. So particularly for those people who are working in highly diverse counties, if you're struggling to find stock images that are really representative of the demographics that you work with, Raw Pixel is one of the greatest, I think, image resources to pull pictures from. You can sign up for a free account and you'll have access to a lot of free images. If you pay, it's a fairly inexpensive fee to buy like an individual like year license, and it gives you access to all their premium photos as well. And it's a beautiful assortment of stock images. And then for graphic design, you can use services like Canva to create social media graphics. We'll do a Canva 101 course on Friday of this week to get you started with Canva. And then Piktochart is really great for infographics. And I should have put some video resources on here too. We're recommending, if you're trying to create like short videos, you can either use Adobe Spark, which is great. We had a session last Friday that was recorded and it's on our LOD site. You can also use Adobe Premiere Rush as a very simplified video editing program. And we do have access to Adobe Premiere Rush through our Creative Cloud license. So everybody can get access to that as well. So there's lots of great stuff out there. With that, I will open it up in the last 15 minutes or so that we have for questions, comments. Does this feel like something you might use? Does it seem overwhelming? Has anybody used programs or frameworks like this in the past to help you really strategize about programming? I see some thumbs up from some people. A lot of people are quiet today. Must be all that zoomed out. Everybody's just zoomed out. Well, we will stick around here for a little while. So if you have questions or comments, we will be on our LOD team and we can help you with some of that stuff. Otherwise, I would just like to say a huge thank you to everybody for being on today. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Our session tomorrow at 1 p.m. is going to be design principles. So we have Cassie Dietrich on, and she will be basically doing like a design 101 class, which I'm super thrilled about because she's going to dig into like some of the brain science about the importance of proper design and even like branding and things like that. So it's going to be a great session. I'm super excited about that one. So thanks everybody for being on. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now, but we will stick around for you.